So here we are at the end of 2022, the first year in Master Duel's life. I owe a lot to this game. It's where a lot of my most viewed content has come from. It reignited my love of the franchise of Yu-Gi-Oh! I made some new friends with it, and more. Over the year, I've seen the game go through a number of changes, from feature upgrades, aesthetic changes, quality of life upgrades, to format changes where the best deck in the game was constantly changing. Never again. Never again. So what better way to wrap up the year than by going over the monthly events? After all, these served as a good indicator of where the game was at the time, and see what worked in these events, what didn't, what were the best decks, what were the worst decks. So without further ado, here's all the events in Master Duel so far, ranked. Let's not beat around the bush here. You just can't take it anymore. Synchro Festival was absolutely terrible. And not in the fun explosion of chaos kind of way, in the worst kind of way. By being boring. Konami let a lot of stuff loose for this event, and it was not for the better. Wanted to face a Synchro deck? Too bad. You were facing off against True Draco and Stun decks. Two decks that can already be a pain, and in this event, when you're naturally expecting Synchro, were absolutely nightmarish, and dragged this event to a crawl. But even if you managed to avoid those decks, what were the two biggest Synchro decks in the game? Synchrons and Adamantippators. Two of the most painfully slow decks in the game. Adamantippators were especially bad, as the excavation animation used to be so slow that Konami had to patch the game to make it go faster. This archetype is so slow and awful, it required a quality of life upgrade. After this event, Konami thankfully looked over how they handled extra deck events, but this is still such a bad event that I still think—
oh my god, are they still flicking their cards?
I just wanted a good Link Festival. I just wanted a Link Festival. But no, you just had to screw it up. The Link Fest, Regulation Duel was a recurring joke in my videos beforehand. And come the time it finally arrives, they screw it up in a pretty sad way. While most elements were fine going in, such as the ban list, one thing screwed up this event from being what it could have been: the Regulation Duel format. Unlike every other festival, this event uses a rank system much like the Duelist Cup. However, whereas that system makes sense for an event that's supposed to be more competitive, here it just turned the event into a grind. And with this more competitive system came the same two decks over and over and over again. Were you sus or salad?
It doesn't matter!
Because you were getting Labyrynth over and over and over again. With the lack of a lot of easy to bring out monster effect negates, it meant that Nibiru was basically an inevitability with this event. Which maybe I could deal with if, again, it wasn't for the horrible rank system that meant you were stuck in rank limbo. I know a lot of people who couldn't even finish this event because of this system. This became my most viewed video for all the events I covered, probably due to the mass disappointment felt by players. Can't say I blame them. Being bored sucks. Being disappointed sucks. But then there's so bad it's good. The Xyz Festival is certainly so bad it's good. The event where the #1 strategy was blowing yourself up. This was Konami's first event, and it definitely showed. For those who don't remember, Konami screwed up the reward system, where as a result, it was a lot quicker to build a self-burn deck to lose on purpose to get the rewards, rather than actually have proper duels. It was an absolute mess, and even after Konami fixed the rewards, Numerons ran rampant. Though, that being said, when it was a proper Xyz Festival, it was actually pretty good. There was a good amount of variety, and not only did I have fun when faced with a proper Xyz deck like Zodiacs or Utopia, but I also laughed hard when hit with a self-burn player. There was a weird sense of twisted fun to try and kill them before they killed themselves, or heal them in some players' cases. So yes, while this event was still booty, but booties are nice. Alright, enough of the bad events. Now onto the, well, I wouldn't call it good, but getting better. The Fusion Festival did everything right, but at the same time, I only consider it average. The ban list was thoroughly acceptable, although True Draco still got to run rampant, to the point I personally had a 27-turn duel with them. And that duel was on mobile, so you bet that was incredibly quick-paced. There really wasn't a lot wrong with this event. There was some decent variety with Shaddolls, pre-branded Fusion Despia, Heroes, Fluffles, and such. This was also the first event that had a mate as an reward with Instant Fusion, who, I don't care who you are, having a Noodle Cup as an avatar is hilarious. But that being said, There's not a lot I can really say about this event. Not a lot of big surprises happened, or anything that changed the overall game. Yes, there was a lot of DPE, but honestly, DPE was everywhere in the meta anyways, and would be used in plenty of months after. I liked it quite a bit at the time, but that was probably more so because of how frustrated I was with the Synchro Festival. But it's fine, it got the job done. 6.5 out of 10, 3 out of 5 stars, your average mid-2000s Jason Statham movie. Here's one you might be a bit surprised to hear about, the first Duelist Cup. In my video on this event, I made it clear how burnt out I was on it. And during the event I made my feeling all too prevalent with my friends about how much I disliked it. But in hindsight, it's grown on me. For one, it was for this event I built the deck that got me to Diamond 1 for the first time, Virtual World, which has since become my all-time favorite deck, to the point I recreated it in real life. It gave me the kick in the pants I needed to get a lot of my decks to Diamond level, where I've managed to get to almost every time since. And the ranked format actually makes sense this time around in comparison to the link regulation. I think the problem with this event was more so the meta the game was in at the time, which was pretty rough. It was the peak of the adventure and DPE engines, the reign of cards that probably should have been banned a while ago like Imperial Order, and of course, Hulk decks, which you're probably sick of me complaining about at this point. But I don't care, screw Hulk! But overall, I don't think the event itself was a problem, and it did result in big and necessary changes with the ban list afterwards. Now the second half though, with those paltry rewards and the controversy surrounding it, that's an entirely different story. One of the stranger events in the game, but one I think was surprisingly inventive. Anti-Spell was basically what if Imperial Order was the whole event. And you know what? It was surprisingly pretty fun for the most part. While spell cards themselves were out, pendulum cards were fair game, which made using pendulum decks like Valence or Pendulum Magicians rather interesting. This and the adjustments to the ban list gave a lot of surprises for the event, like the normally high-level Eldritch or Endymion decks being surprisingly weak, whereas Paleofrogs, Sword Soul, and Altergeist proved surprisingly formidable. And given the heavy reliance on spell cards, fusion decks weren't all that viable except for Dynamorphia, which given the then meta, was rather refreshing. Now then, it wasn't perfect. The pacing of the event was a lot slower than most events, making this feel more akin to, well, Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2006. Also, Emancipators made an unwelcome comeback, meaning I got to encounter Fleck in this, ranked, and even the Duelist Cup, which you know my feelings about. Still, that's just one annoying deck. You can't rag on an event because of one awful deck. Speaking of... Wah, flu, wah, birds. Yeah, alright, we get it. I hate the birds. They were not the only deck people used in the Extra Zero event. I am fascinated by the sheer vitriol Extra Zero got just for the bloody birds. That's a real shame because people spent so much time complaining about flu, missed out on a really unique event. This event had some of the most unique deck lists I've ever seen for an event. Yes, there was flu, but there were also Endymions, Eldritch, Subterrors, Ultra Athletes, True Draco, in a place where they belong, Cosmo, and more. This event also gave rise to the Ben K deck, one of the funniest troll decks to ever hit Master Duel. It was a ton of fun and allowed for some really interesting experimentation. And yeah, you may complain about flu in that event, but lads, birds piss you off that much, just remember, you don't really have to worry about them much anymore. After the first Duelist Cup had a lot of issues, Konami thankfully hit a home run with the second one. There's not a whole lot to say. It's the Duelist Cup again, but this time a whole lot better. Now, as of writing, this event is still going on, and the second half hasn't even started yet. So bear in mind something may still happen. But regardless, we had some great stuff introduced with that month's secret pets, with Predaplants getting a big boost as well as the introduction of Runix, and one of my recent new favorites, Labyrynth. The new rules of crossplay also are going to massively help the second half avoid the same problems as before, and the meta this time around was honestly a lot healthier, even with the past few months of branded domination. I encountered a ton of different decks this time around, and I had some surprisingly intense duels against several rogue decks. Not a bad way to end the year. Although, good lord, please hit Runix some way in the ban list. And now it's time for the really good stuff, starting with the one that I'm sure is a lot of people's favorite, NNR. In short, normal and rare cards only. No super rares or ultra rares here. Sorry, hero players. This event was not only one of the easiest to build for just because they were so cheap, but also one where there were some real surprise success stories. Vampires are a fun archetype normally, but not especially good. But here, they were absolutely brutal. Metaphors, Megaliths, 10E minus Sword Soul, Time Lords, and more also got a chance to shine. This event does what I think a lot of the best events do, and that's completely reevaluate how you approach building your deck. A lot of the extra deck events are typically easy to prep for. Synchro only, Synchrons. Links only, Marincess. Or just go for True Draco. But normals and rares only? Now we're talking. Out of all the Master Duel events, this is the one I see people recreating the most. And it's easy to see why. It was just such a unique experience that I'd love to see it pop up again. I think if you watched my videos for a while, you knew that Limit 1 was going to rank highly. Once again, the idea of only being able to use one copy of each card per deck made deck building exceptionally tricky, but also rather fun. While the likes of Sword Soul were rather poor, decks and archetypes that have had plenty of variety of cards over the years, or had synergy with other decks, worked wonderfully. Pendulum Magicians, Heroes, Witchcrafters, Paleofrogs, Tri-Brigade Zoo. Holy crap, Tri-Brigade Zoo in this event was nuts. That was a deck that was already pretty good, but here it was lethal. It also had one of the best ban lists ever, with the banning of Union Carry, VFD, and Hulk, allowing for a varied and fair event. It never felt like there was one overwhelmingly powerful deck. Even Tri-Brigade Zoo, which was arguably the top tier deck in this event, wasn't like this annoying monstrosity of a deck. It was really fun, and given how many decks recently have come and gone in the ranking system, it's got me curious how another Limit 1 event would do. The only complaint I really have is, outside of the loner decks, is the mate you got sucked. Really? Shard of Greed? For the number one event in this game, I had to really think. It couldn't just be the event itself being fun. It also had to have everything around it working. From the ban list, to the rewards, to even the loner decks. At the end of this event, I knew it was a serious contender for number one. Synchro exceeds. I made fun of it on the announcement, but I am eating my words here, because the event was extremely good. This kind of event meant that we saw a huge variety of decks being utilized. Sword Soul, Exorcister, Virtual Worlds, Dinos, Pendulum Magicians, etc. The ban list was very well done, banning the likes of the barrier statues, block dragons, and severely nerfing the likes of Flu, Numerons, and True Draco, so they were a lot harder to utilize in this event compared to before. The rewards were nice, with Quillbolt Hedgehog being obtainable. I mean, look at this little guy, he's hard not to love. And even the loner decks were actually decent. Sure, the Ghost Trick one wasn't great, but the Pendulum one was decent, and the Sword Soul deck could surprisingly pack a punch in this event. And as much as I make fun of Sword Soul on occasion for it being pretty basic, it was still fun utilizing them again. All of these factors made for an extremely fun event, and I replayed this event constantly. Not for the rewards necessarily, but often just for the fact it was really fun. Top marks. So, those were all the events in Master Duel. Some of them sucked, especially some of the early ones, but they did get bigger and better as they went on. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next in the game. Redoing some of these events with updated content could be fun, but as well I wonder what they will do for some of the events where the rules are reworked, like Limit 1 or Anti-Spell. Will there be events dedicated for single types or attributes? Will we have ones themed around a point in the game's history? Who knows? But what about you? What was your favorite and least favorite event? Let me know in the comments, please subscribe, and here's to the next year in Master Duel, and whatever the future may hold.